Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I am joined by my good friend Problem Being, and we'll be talking in a podcast series about the current state of Doctor Who, everything that's been going on for the past, oh God knows, 2 years now, and just where we think the show's going in general. Sorry about the shoddy start, guys. I'm still really getting used to this StreamYard. It's constantly trying to sell you things, and it's just so frustrating. So anyway, without any further ado, let's bring on the one, the only Problem Being.
Hello. Are we coming through okay?
I think so. I say
Awesome.
people are going to have to let me know in the comments if we're coming through okay. Not that we got anyone at the moment. So yeah, there was a bit of an issue. So the scheduling thing was the 24-hour clock until suddenly it wasn't. So I accidentally set it for 7:30 when it's meant to be 5:30. But you know, it's me, so I really shouldn't expect anything else.
Standard.
Oh God, I really like seriously. Everything with StreamYard is like, hey, money, give us money, and you can have this.
Well,
It's
it's like
like,
everything,
oh,
isn't it? Everything.
every single thing. Yep.
Welcome
So,
to capitalism. Well, it's not capitalism, it's corporatism. Anyway.
it started already. So oh gosh, how do we even start this? So Doctor Who.
Yes. Or as the Monty Python sketch would have it, it's ceased to be, it's a stiff, it's bereft of life, it rests in peace. It's an ex-Doctor Who. Yeah, it's not good, is it? It's not looking very healthy at all.
No, it really isn't.
But to be fair, it hasn't been nearly a decade, if not more.
I mean, this is it, isn't it? I mean, you know that my opinion has changed a great deal since we started, especially on other channels. You know, since this whole community started, you know that I was a bit of a avid defender of Russell T Davies and his original era, and you've slowly seen how over time that has just been gradually worn away.
Well, I don't think it's just been worn away. I think it's been chipped away relentlessly. It's been one of those things that appears to me to be a concerted effort, actually, to chisel away the excesses of fandom that they just chose they didn't want. And it's remarkable to me that, when they talk about, oh, they want the younger audience, well, they've been driving even the younger audience away. They've driven the older fans away, like myself. They've driven RTD1 fans away, like yourself. And I just don't know what audience they are looking for and how you go about manufacturing one, because they seem to think that you can just magic one out of thin air. When they made that statement about, what was it, that Jinx Monsoon character,
Oh,
said,
for every old fan that leaves, 5 will replace them.
yeah, or transphobic bigot, I think it was, but something like that. But everyone is a transphobic bigot according to them, regardless of where you stand on the subject. If you step out of line or say the wrong thing or look the wrong way or do anything, breathe in a particular way, you're cast out. It's so it's like the adage of the purity test. If you fail the purity test, you're not invited. So it's become a very elitist thing, Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who's always had a bit of an elitist issue amongst fandom. But when the fandom takes over the show and brings it back in its own image, this is what you get, I think.
It was a very specific type of fan, wasn't it? You know, I mean, my personal opinion is people say that fans running a show is a bad thing, but I think a perfect example of the contrary is the show that I've been watching recently, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I think if it weren't for fans and people who were invested in the lore and in the universe, chances are things like continuity and just those little things in there that the casual viewer might not think much about, but just those little things that you go, oh, that ties it in with that. I just worried that would be lost
Well,
almost.
I think you get two types of fans, really, don't you? You get the types of fans who are in it because of the passion and the love for the show, and then you get the fans which are the climbers and the posers and the elitists who just want attention and to be in control. And I think we got the latter with Russell T Davies, quite honestly, and co, the Fitzroy clan. Hi guys, there's people in the chat there. Hello Mark, hello PD Rich.
Yep, thanks for joining us here, guys. Once again, apologies for the scheduling. I made a mistake. I mixed up the 24-hour clock, because 1 minute it was the 24-hour clock, the next minute it was just normal. So yeah, got the time mixed up. But thanks for joining us here. Yeah, so that's what I mean. It seems to be the type of fandom. But in your opinion, and this is sort of directly related to Russell T Davies, because I mean we've both heard him speak, and to make sure we're not treading old ground, there has recently been an interview with him on this. I'm just going to say it was on the show by a bit of a strange person, and it was just going all in on show running for Doctor Who and his career in television, and he was adamant that Doctor Who was his favorite show. And I just suppose the real question is like, what is being a fan to him? Because I don't think it's quite the same as it is for me and you.
Well, I think when he says he's a fan, I think what he means to say is he was a fan. I think as a child growing up, he was a fan. I have no doubt about it. But I think as an adult, yes, he wanted to bring it back and claimed, oh, I wanted to bring it back for years and years and all the rest of it. Not to use a pun. But it seems to me either he's lost what it was that he fell in love with in the first place, or something's happened. I don't know. A switch went off in his brain. It's not Doctor Who to me. I've always struggled with New Who. I kept watching it in the hope and expectation, oh, it's going to get better. It did the opposite. So that's
well, this is the interesting thing, because since really kind of becoming more into classic Who, it really has kind of shifted. I mean, I will give this again, even though I'm sure many of you have heard me say this a dozen times, but I came in during the RTD era. When the show changed to the Stephen Moffat era, it was such a jarring change that it did kind of put me off, because for better or for worse, as a child, I did love that very, I suppose, what would now be considered overly camp, overly colourful. It definitely had its hold, and I think the kids do love it. And I think that is something that RTD was really good at. So all you need to do is look at shows like the Sarah Jane Adventures. And but then, of course, before the show changed to Stephen Moffat, I had actually discovered Classic Who, and I discovered it because there were these free episodes being given away on discs with the Sun paper. So, I was like, wow, because you guys should know I'm a huge Dalek fanboy, or was. I mean, I still have lots on my shelf, and I do still love looking at them from time to time. But it was the Daleks, like anything with the Daleks on, you've got me sold. And what really got me into Classic Who was just starting off with the Dalek stories, because that was the big draw in for me. Just seeing all the different colors, the different styles, it was amazing. I mean, even as a kid, and I've never understood the mentality of these people who have been fans since 2005 and have not watched Classic Who. Like, as a kid, it was like just discovering it. It's like, wow, there's more. It was exciting. It was fun. I mean, maybe I had an advantage because I was raised by my grandparents, so I was already introduced to black and white television, and the older stuff. I suppose I was very lucky in that many ways. So, seeing the Daleks in black and white, I didn't look at that and go, oh, it's old. I looked at that and went, that is cool. like to think that they'd been going for that long. And of course, I started off in a bit of a wonky order with with the Dalek stories. Then I saw Tomb of the Cybermen, just absolute classic. And then what was nice was after I'd got the Sontaran box sets, which I think had just been in New Who by that point, I got the Beneath the Surface box set, which was the first time I'd ever seen Silurian Sea Devils. Because I saw them in a trailer, because on the DVDs, you used to get the trailers as a special feature, and I saw that trailer and I was like, they look cool. And I got that, and I stuck with those stories for quite some time. So then the Russell T Davies era transitioned into the Moffat era. I was like, this is new, but I'm just not sure if it's for me. But I kept watching because, I was a fan. And my love for Classic Who started to grow more and more because I started exploring those stories that I hadn't watched and really kind of filling in the gaps. And, stories that I looked at and go, oh, the monster isn't very good in that one. I don't like it, have now gone on to become some of my favorites. Ironically, the Time Meddler and the Talons of Wen Chiang, and Caves of Androzani. Like, I looked at Sharaz Jek, and, well, let's just say looking at him comparing to looking at a Silurian was night and day. But of course, as you get older, you start to have a much more perspective. But that was what was wonderful about Classic Who. It was the exploration of it, and there was so much. And sadly, it is such a shame, but I don't think I am ever going to quite have that again, because New Who has just burned out so much that, once you've watched Classic Who as much as I have, and make no mistake, it was a regular weekday thing. It was the perfect thing to watch before on a school night, I think. And don't take this as me saying it's bad, but it was just something that you could really wind down to. It's very simple, nice format, and nice stories. And it used to be a big comfort for me, watching Classic Who. But as I say, I think I've watched it to death, and having to sort of, I suppose, only have the older stuff to rely on will eventually wear out. And that's exactly what's happened, and like you, just constantly waiting for New Who to get better and hopefully reignite that spark, and it just hasn't happened. Now, this, of course, isn't Classic Who's fault. It's not Classic Who's fault
Well,
at all.
it's not the fault of Classic Who, but for you, it's become a casualty of New Who. You got sold a bag of goods and it turned sour, and everything peripheral is become tinged by that. And I find that very sad, because I mean, it's a whole universe in its own right. Classic Who for me is and will always be the definitive Doctor Who. That's what it was. That's how it was envisioned. That's how it was created, and that's what it is. New Who felt like a pretty good addition at first. It felt like, oh, maybe this is a continuation. It's a bit, without sounding too elitist myself, but it felt a bit lowbrow. It felt a bit too goofy, too much comedy for me. I like a bit of humor in Doctor Who, but I think it has to be sparing, or in character, in keeping with the character, his own dry sense of humor, rather than madcap running up and down corridors like Scooby-Doo kind of thing.
Yeah.
I always struggled with that. And it just got worse. I mean, with RTD, it was more your sort of almost like a live action cartoon. Then with Moffat, it became more like a fairy tale. And then with Chibnall, it just became incredibly preachy and boring. And then with RTD2, I don't know what the hell happened there.
It became a personal attack, didn't it?
Is this a personal attack or something?
It just became like, it just became this vile, very targeted, very deliberate attack.
Nasty and mean.
At the fans. It's like, oh, what, you didn't like the direction that we took it in? It's
Get out.
But going back to what you said about Classic Who being the superior show. Now, believe it or not, a few years ago, I used to despise people who said that. I
Mm,
used to call them Classic Who fanatics, and for me, they were the most irritating type of fan in this fandom. But how innocent I was back then. You know, this was before I discovered what we've been dealing with for the past 8 years. But I can never understand that. In my mind, the Moffat era certainly was on a downward trajectory, but of course, me coming in 2005, you know, naturally I'm going to have that sort of bias, and I was always able to kind of put the two of them together. Like Doctor Who is Doctor Who. That's all there is to it. But
mm,
of course, as I got older and as I started to become more analytical, I think the longer this has gone on, and of course, me and you, we did do a rewatch of RTD's original era,
mm.
and the more I can see that, you know what, classic Doctor Who was really just a victim of its own budget. But in terms of imagination, like you could easily put it up there with Alien, Terminator, and in many ways it pioneered a lot of this stuff. And I just, I suppose as I became more creatively fueled, as I got into my late teens, I started to go, why is it that Doctor Who could never reach this levels? Like it seems to me as though at least Classic Who was trying, but with
Mm.
New Who, it was just becoming almost a parody of itself. Well, no, it was a parody of
But
itself.
certainly is a parody, more than ever. You know, it was always I think a bit of a, well, I think it was more of a homage at first, then it became parody. The longer it went on, the more dried up. And you know, and we were talking about this before we started the stream. You know, when uh, people in this fandom talk about, oh, the show is all about change. It's always about change, 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 progress, progress, change, change, change. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, the show has changed, but it's not for the better. Not all change is good or for the better, or progress is somewhere good. It can progress off a cliff, and that's precisely where it is. But the one constant that, you know, for all the talk of change and progress, the one constant is the same people at the top and in the crews. You know, it's usually the same people all the time for 20 years. And now, if
Yeah,
you look at Classic Who, that real change, actually, the real change that we saw growing up. So when, you know, older fans get attacked for not liking change, well, we actually saw change. We saw change from the 70s through to the 80s. You know, there was a constant change of the people at the top, apart from obviously JNT, but even towards the end, you know, you had the Cartmel plan and all this kind of coming in, and who knows where that may have gone. But we were very open to change. It was always traumatizing when the Doctor changed, or sometimes people like one era more than the other. But we watched it and we still enjoyed it. But the people at the top changed. Today, 20 years, it's the same bloody people, the same
yeah,
people in charge as they were 20 years ago. And that's
and
not change at
that's
all.
not
That's stale.
that's not really a good thing, really, because
No.
when you look at Classic Who, uh, when it got to the end of the 60s with the Troughton, the show was very nearly cancelled because it was getting that dry and stale. You
Mm,
know, so an entirely new team was brought in.
yeah.
And I know some people say, well, oh, well, Terrence Dicks was there in late season 6. I'm like, yeah, he was, but he was to oversee the transition. That's how
Mm,
I see it, you
yeah.
know. And just look at the freshness. Like when you really look at Classic Who, you could see it as like 5 or 6 different shows, and yet
Mhm,
all connected. And I think, you know, some are definitely better than others, but I think each one has its merits and each one
mm,
has its flaws. And, you know, I suppose it's easier for me as someone who came in 2005, but I don't necessarily think 80s Doctor Who deserves the hate it gets. Like perhaps it's not quite got that sort of character drivenness that the 60s, early 70s had.
mm,
Instead, it became more of just, you know, each story happens and you move on to the next one, simple as. Sort of late McCoy, they started to move back to a more overall arching thing, which I thought was nice. A
yeah.
lot of fans say that the series arcs need to go and it just needs to go back to being anthology. You know, well, yeah, but the danger of that is, I think you run the risk of it. Oh, nothing has any meaning. You just come, you do the story, you move straight on to the next one. And as good as the Tom Baker stories were, I did feel that they became a bit formulaic. Like,
Well, I think you've got to tread a fine balance. There's where it becomes anthology, or it becomes soap. And I fear that
oh
you
well,
do stray one way or to the other. It becomes formulaic that
well,
way.
no, hold on. I never said soap. I meant
No, I'm
drama.
just I'm just
I
I'm
meant
just
drama.
saying. Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line again, between drama and soap, and I find that nowadays, particularly, we've strayed definitely into the soap opera. I don't particularly care about the family, the cousin, the extended family, the dog, of the companion. I want to see them being whisked away and exploring whole other worlds,
Yeah.
and being absolutely amazed by their experience. Maybe when they come back or whatever, then you can sort of go, oh well, I had this experience and da da da, whatever. But I'm really not that keen on the extended family thing. I think it's just too much sitting around talking about feelings and all this kind of really peripheral stuff, which great in a normal TV drama, but Doctor Who isn't a normal TV drama, and it should never be a normal TV drama.
No, and I think we both know why they went down that path of, really trying to keep it on Earth. And I hate to say it, but the Pertwee era did do the same thing, but at
Mm.
least it had a narrative reason for it. Like,
And
it
it
had
was
kind of
characters you genuinely liked, but we didn't go home with Benton and meet his grandmother and have
no,
a cup of
no,
tea.
no, and that's what I mean. It was balance.
Yeah.
When I say drama, what I loved about the Hartnell era, or at least the first half of it before Verity left, and this is something that not a lot of people talk about, is how the characters of Ian, Barbara, Susan, Vicky, not so much the others, but that their characters seem to progress, even
Mm.
though each story was different. New location, new monsters, or new historical dangers and things they had to. Even the Doctor's character was growing, especially in that first season. And that they had wonderful character moments together. It
Yeah.
was truly something that you could take seriously, and I feel like Doctor Who went through so many identities that it kind of lost that a little bit, even in Classic Who. But as I say, we are venturing like really far off the point. Obviously, to each his own. I did like the sort of character elements that RTD had, but the trouble is, it felt too much like an episode of Hollyoaks
Yeah, exactly.
or
Yeah.
EastEnders, when Doctor Who should be the furthest thing away from that.
Absolutely.
It's a serious drama, not some silly soap where you've got people whinging and moaning about how difficult their life is at school.
Hmm.
And we all know why these writers kept Doctor Who in that lane, because they want to push their political agendas,
Yeah.
their social agendas. I mean, how can you push a social agenda if you're on some dark star in the middle of the Castonian galaxy or whatever? You
They'll find
know,
a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But
Mm.
that's why they said that they wanted to keep it on Earth because they felt that the Doctor should be more human. This is why that they wanted to morph him into something to push the message, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's gone from, as I said, the progress of change that we've seen is homage to fairy tale, to boring, preachy, politically correct nonsense, to whatever the hell this is, which is just complete pastiche at this point. It's so easy to send up, when you've got, the what's his name, John Coleshaw doing that skit. And it was so on the nose, but it's easy to be on the nose when the show itself has become on the nose. And I think that that's the main problem. It's lost its way. It's become so superficial, and just used as a vehicle to lecture and hector you. and to tell you how hateful you are and how awful you are, how much we know better than you, and listen to the corporation. When was Doctor Who all about, the corporation being the heroes?
Well, I mean, all you have to do, I know I'm not particularly fond of the story, but I will agree with the message. I mean, look at the Sunmakers.
Yeah, but the Sunmakers at least had the cleverness to make it, in a proper science fiction context. They're not doing science fiction anymore because there are no rules. There's no laws of physics. It's all magic and mystery box. There's no thought gone into it. There's no meaning to any of it. It's very nihilistic, because when you have no rules, no laws, no real motivation, no mechanics to that universe anymore, you remove any real threat, because you could just press a button or click a finger or something magical happens and then it's all resolved. The magic MacGuffin machine that will fix everything. And the sonic screwdriver gets a lot of hate, but from what I've seen from the last 2 seasons, that's the least of your worries. You've got this other blimmin' thing that he picks up and uses as a gun, ironically, given that they didn't want the Sonic to look like it could be mistaken for a gun, because a black man holding a gun is a bad thing or something. And
A black man torturing someone is perfectly fine then.
That's fine, yeah, of course. It's so muddled. And this is, I mean, people coming here going, well, when are you talking about the future? Well, to know the future, you have to know the past. So we're just going over that to see how we got where we are and why people are now talking about the future of Doctor Who, when before it seemed always so sort of self-assured that it was going to go on. But now we know there are problems, and we have to acknowledge what those problems are. And of course, it's been talked about ad infinitum. But our take is we need to really sort of discuss how and why and what's gone wrong, and how do we fix that.
Well, I think for me, and it really comes back to analysing that sort of core difference between classic and New Who. Is with New Who, and this was, I don't want anyone to sort of, start saying things like, oh, you've been groomed to feel this way, or your opinion has only changed because you've been hating on the show for so long. It's like, no, I've taken an objective look, and even looking at RTD's original era, which those of you who know me will know that even a few years ago, I would always defend it. I was its biggest defender.
Bigots.
I've realized that in the stories, the characters came front and center above everything else, and the monsters were often just sidelined. And even it felt like there wasn't really much thought or creativity put into them. Like the message and the characters came first. The monsters, let's make a cool looking monster. And this sadly continued into the Moffat era, because Moffat made it so the characters were like in bloody Harry Potter, where, everything else is just the world around them. And you had these amazing looking monsters like the Fisher King. You had people who spent hours and weeks making that thing. It gets about 2 minutes of screen time and then it gets washed away. It's a fish. And it drowns? And like, guys, I could go on a tantrum about Moffat and just his utter... Like, if we're being honest, and this is what people just don't want to admit, Moffat was good at writing The Curse of the Fatal Death, and that's what he basically wrote for his entire era. The only thing that man ever knew what to do was take the piss out of something. But with Russell, it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels he's either just so unaware or he's doing this deliberate. I mean, when he did the whole bi-generation thing, you only have to go and look at that interview in the Doctor Who Redacted or whatever it's called, where he's like, imagine how much fans love new things and will really rejoice when this happens. It's like you pray. If you can't see that he is winding people up, he's doing this on purpose. He knows what he's doing, Right, and this interview that we watched, where he sits there, he goes, "Oh, Doctor Who is the wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing." It's like, yeah, but you clearly never understood it, Russell. And I'm sorry that that's just how it comes across to me.
I don't think either he's not understood it or he's forgotten. For a man who trumpets his own intellect, as he does in just about every interview about his life, where he always bangs on about how he was a bookie person and he was always a genius, I was a genius. But it doesn't take a genius to point out your many, many flaws, Russell. And it's not just your flaws, it's like your bullying, your facetiousness, your arrogance. It really strikes me quite significantly. That I think, as I said before in previous streams, I think that he was a fan of Doctor Who, but he was also embarrassed about it, and that's why he modeled it in his own image, in the sense that, oh, it's got to appeal to this audience, so therefore it's got to look more like Buffy, it's got to look more like Stranger Things, it's got to look more like Bridgerton, and all these other trendy hit shows. But it's not Doctor Who. Doctor Who never had to try and pretend to be anything that it wasn't. Yes, it borrowed heavily from classic horror stories and stuff like that, but it had a very strong identity of its own, and a lot of other shows emulated that or wanted to copy that format. And I think he lacked the courage of his own convictions. I think that he undermined the longevity of Doctor Who by making it a trendy show for trendy people. And like with most trends, people come, they enjoy the trend for a while, it falls out of the zeitgeist, and they move on to something else. So there's no longevity through chasing that mythical audience, which is so flighty anyway, and betraying the audience who've been loyal and who introduced the next generation of fans, be it their children, their niece, their nephew, whatever, their grandchildren. You cut that off. You've discombobulated that line, that silver thread that has always been there from 1963 all the way through. And it brought them back in 2005. And then you cut that off. You cut that off so you can engineer a very flighty, superficial audience that doesn't really care about science fiction. So you change it from being a science fiction show to being a fantasy show with keyword themes. And it's so arrogant in how it went about doing that. And they didn't hide their contempt for the audience. And when you drive a wedge into your audience, not just between them, I mean, you've decimated the fandom. RTD2 decimated it even further. Half the fandom that he wanted to stay on were divided.
Well,
on season 2 of
we weren't even out the gate, and he told me to F off. And all I said, guys, was to stop behaving like such a pompous upper class twit and saying all this nonsense. Like,
well, that's when he was on. That's when he was on the writer's strike, and he was talking down to people who work selling shoes. Like that's something. Oh, creative people being forced to sell shoes. It's this contemptible.
Basically,
nasty.
The translation. Can you imagine if all these wonderful elite people would have to, work a job and actually go out in society like everyone else has to? Oh, it'd be awful. And the worst part about it is these people are so shit, they can't even make good television, which makes me think there's a poor sod out there now stacking a shelf who should be making television because he's got she's got genuine talent.
But it's the wrong skin color or the wrong gender or
no, it's not even that. It's not even that. It's nothing to do with that. It's you are not down with us. You're not one of us. Elite.
But I mean that's the tick box list. So that if you don't, I mean, on paper, that's what it is. But we all know that the whole DEI thing is a cover for radical Marxist ideas. So it doesn't matter what skin color you are or what's between your legs. It's, do you agree with us or don't you? And if you don't agree with us, it doesn't matter what color you are, what's between your legs, what gender you are, what you identify as. If you don't agree with us, you're not in. You're not in
Sorry,
the elite club.
I just have to respond to what the TARDIS Zone has said, that Doctor Who
I
creates
know.
trends. It absolutely used to.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced that Day of the Daleks did the Terminator before the Terminator. Go and watch it, and you'll see what I mean. I'm
Yeah.
convinced that, you know, Seeds of Doom was the inspiration for John Carpenter's version of The Thing.
Yeah.
Go watch it. I'm convinced that, you know, that, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, what's that show? What's it called? Sorry, Dragon Ball Z. I'm convinced that that Jackal character was inspired by Sutekh. You
Even the
know,
production of Dirk Gently's Detective Agency, or the American version, was very, very Doctor Who-y, the way that they cast the lead actor and wrote the scripts, because it was nothing like the books, but it was more like Doctor Who, sort of circa 2005, but for an American audience. Weird. But yeah, it certainly did kick off a few copycats, and you know, I'm sure there's a whole load of others that, you know, don't spring to mind, because obviously, you know, when you see shows like this come along and think, well, that's just a cheap knockoff.
isn't it interesting that some of the biggest names in Hollywood, when it comes to directors and creators, have proclaimed to be Doctor and admitted, you know, whether shamefully or not, to have been huge Doctor Who fans
Peter Jackson.
of classic Who, not new Who. Like
Yeah,
classic Who, they grew up with Tom Baker.
Yeah. Tom Baker, I mean, you see it in The Simpsons, you know, you see him pop up in all sorts of things, you
Yeah,
know, Family Guy,
Futurama,
Futurama, you know,
South Park. I believe or did South Park? They had a Dalek in there, didn't they?
well, this is it, you know, they're such iconic, and I hate using that word, but they are iconic in terms of they are in the zeitgeist still. They perpetuate everything, you know, because when people mention Doctor Who, before Tennant came along, people would instantly thought of Tom Baker. Then it was David Tennant, and now it's kind of like a mix of both, you know. And
Although
I think,
I think
although
Tennant
now
has
they think
fallen out.
now they think it's more like, oh, that Q word show, you know, rather than any actual
That
Doctor.
that is what I really wanted to talk to you about, because we're talking about the future of Doctor Who, but I think the problem is that before 2005, and I will go as far back as that because I know it wasn't aggressive, and I know that me and you have gotten heated over this. But it was when and I hope you won't mind me saying it. It was when, I'm not going to say the gay agenda, but it was when it was becoming a bit of the show's identity with Russell T Davies, and we all know why. Now, I have no problem with homosexual characters, and I certainly have no problem with homosexual actors, because, like it or not, they are some of the funniest people in comedy. You know, Mr. Humphreys from Are You Being Served is a perfect example. But
Well,
what
but isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how people used to say Mr. Humphreys as a character was a negative gay stereotype, and then we get Ncuti Gatwa, who is arguably far more camp than Mr. Humphreys, and he's lauded as a big success and a wonderful character. He's a sociopath. The character of the Doctor under Ncuti Gatwa's so-called performance was that of a sociopath, a torturing sociopath, a flirtatious, angsty, frivolous, flirty, sexualized beast of a man, you know, just wants to F something, you know, you feel like he would rub up against your leg more than, you know,
yeah,
try and solve, you know,
but
what the problem is.
but back to the point. So
Oh,
I
sorry.
suppose no. I'm just trying to keep us on point. So I suppose it's what Doctor Who will be remembered for. And when you think of classic Who, you know, some people choose to remember it for the wobbly sets, the cardboard, maybe sometimes the questionable acting. But I think others remember it for, wow, that was really pushing the boundaries at the time. And I think it has a huge library of timeless stories. Like, for example, Tomb of the Cybermen, I think, is a story in its own right. You can watch that from start to finish, and it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to anything.
Very true.
I think it's so well directed and it's so well made. You don't need to go all the way back to Hartnell and watch it to enjoy it and appreciate it. And I think, seeing how much that's what's considered that silly pastiche sci-fi show influenced, compare that to what the 2005 onward show has influenced, because I really can't see much.
Yeah, it there's no, like I said before, there's no logical consistency. RTD has created a universe of meaninglessness. If you can have gods popping up here, there, and everywhere and get defeated by a gizmo that, happens to be at hand conveniently, and and you've got people who can just generate a drop of a hat now, or come back from the dead effectively, or whatever. It's just so meaningless. There's no jeopardy. There's no loss. There's no heartache. There's no pathos. There's no anything. It's all very meaningless, very nihilistic, and it's all about, oh, look how much money we've got and how much it's chucking at the screen, and look how it sticks, and isn't it glorious? But it ultimately, it's drivel. There's no narrative. I mean, you start creating these mystery box school theater, where you've got, oh, who's this magic character? Ooh, what are they about? We don't know. We're just going to write it last minute on the back of a fag packet and then claim that we had this idea all along. And it's so obvious that you've got no plan. For a man who came back and said, oh, I've got all these ideas. No, you didn't, because before you said you'd run out of ideas, and I still believe you. But when you come back and you say, oh, I've got all these amazing ideas all of a sudden. No, you don't. You came in last minute to write all this because you knew after Whittaker had finished her run that the show was axed. It was on its way out. It was cancelled, gone. But you came in, and because you couldn't have your legacy destroyed, ironically, and you brought in Disney, and then you said, oh, you wanted to protect the show from Disney.
Yeah,
how does that work? You bring them in, and then you don't know if you trust them. What?
Yeah, but I'm sorry. Like, you say you don't want to have your legacy destroyed, but you have. Like, if you'd have just let it go, then New Who would have been seen as a success for the most part. I know certainly I would have been like, oh, well, it was what it was. And I think it could have come back. I think if it had just ended at the Chibnall era, future writers and future creators, after a bit of a break, I think the fans would have been much more like, oh, that's just how not to do it. I mean, every show's got to have a clunk era. I mean, Star Trek's definitely had it, and
yeah, but a decade, or 8 years plus, I mean, the end of, I mean, a lot of Capaldi's run was pretty terrible, but I when he came onto that Manchester Evening interview and said that he doesn't want to he doesn't ever hand in a bad script or something, I nearly fell off my chair.
I mean, you know me, I burst into tears because I think at that moment I just realized that this guy, he was absolutely right about one thing, because he even admitted that he lived in his own little world as a kid, because he was just so out of it. He never had to worry about anything. And I believe you. And to be honest, I don't think he's ever not been in his own little world.
Well, the man willfully said that he had a job working for, was it the Sunday Sport? He didn't realize it was a titty mag, and then as a cartoonist, and then he decided to go on the Dole rather than because he was so moral. So immediately you see the sanctimony, the moral superiority of this guy.
So the same man who doesn't want to do cartoons on a kissy kissy bang bang mag is the same man who's basically saying that we should push what propaganda on children.
Yeah. I mean, it's beyond. I mean, are we surprised at this point that the man is an abject hypocrite? But the thing is, it's like you willfully made yourself unemployed and you went on the dole. So you made he's always making these claims that down with the people, and he comes from an exceedingly middle class, well off family. He had no family problems. he was the only male in his family, amongst his brethren. Sorry, sister, because he only had sisters. He had no competition there. He was spoilt rotten. He went to Oxford. He was in jobs all the time. He was off work, I believe, less than a year or something like that. He just walked into jobs like boomers did and just got offered jobs because he was the right kind of person that they were looking for, etc. So he's just waltzed through life. The man's had no concerns, no worries. I mean, he had to look after his partner towards the end of his life, and respect for him for that. But leading up to that, prior to that, this guy is just sauteed through life, being handed things and bullying people. He said he was never bullied at school because he was tall. So you never bullied for being tall. I knew
Yeah,
tall kids at school. They were bullied because they were tall. This guy seems to me he was probably the bully, quite
the bully,
honestly.
yeah. And it's like that sort of seeing his behavior towards fans, on
Oh yeah.
Instagram kind of
No
tells
one
you
dares say no
he
to me.
he he has grown up entirely with women, from
Yeah.
what it sounds like. So he has become the gossip girl, and I think he does behave like that,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
from all the things that have come out, um, allegedly, of course, about what a nightmare he is to work with. I can fully believe that. I
Yeah.
really can.
I think, well, out of all the showrunners for New Who, only one showrunner has had two issues with their leading man. Eccleston, Gatwa, all left under a cloud, and RTD was in charge of both of those. Interesting, isn't it?
Well, I think Gatwa was just not a likable person. So I think, it was only a matter of time before those two ate each other. And I don't mean that in the way you're thinking.
Well, I do. I think probably a lover's tip, quite honestly. But that's just my opinion. Says so on the thing there. I just think the problem is now, where does it go? So we need to get onto obviously the future of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Where do you think the future of Doctor Who lies? Is there one?
I've said this, and I said this. Noel knows I said this because I said this on the stream, in the chat. But I said that as long as it is involved with the BBC creatively, or anyone that has been involved or associated with this Fitzroy group, and we know that these guys have pretty much taken over the whole of BBC, almost the whole of BBC drama, like the whole. I mean, even watching the show Survivors from the 2000s, like there are loads of Doctor Who actors in there, and no doubt people behind the scenes who will work on it. They just see everyone seems to know each other. You like a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, Toby Whithouse," and like, well, yeah, Being Human was great, but it did go a bit preachy towards the end, and I still reckon he is a part of that group, that just took over everything. Um, if Doctor Who doesn't break away from these people and just go to someone completely different, who has got an actual creative vision for it, then there is no point. It doesn't matter how long you put it on hiatus for. It doesn't matter how much you try and bait people back with, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, you're going to have this. You are not going to get good Doctor Who. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah.
it's got to be completely brand new. And I just, because we know how, protective the BBC are, we know how much, even when the license is dead, I still don't believe, the people at Big Finish, Russell, all these people, they're going to find some way of making sure that they own it and that no one else can touch it. It's mine, you can't have it.
There is
And
an element of that, and I think you're right. I think there is a massive. The one thing that really irks me more than anything at the moment is the talk of Russell T Davies deciding where it goes from here.
Yeah,
That man, after this
newsflash.
failure, has no business or any right, quite honestly, to
Yeah,
decide the future of Doctor Who.
like
He had his chance.
why would you console, the person who has sank the ship what kind of boat they should build next?
It's unconscionable. The man has forfeited any ownership to this brand after what he's done the last 2 seasons. He has forfeited that. He has absolutely no right, in my view, that he gets to decide or becomes the kingmaker of whoever takes over. No, you had your chance. You screwed up royally. You need to go. You need to leave. I believe he has. That's my
Yeah,
opinion, but I believe he has. I don't think you're going to get any confirmation until after the war between the land and the river and the sea, whatever the hell it's called.
which I'm not watching, by the way. Just
No,
saying.
I'm not watching it. I to be honest, I keep forgetting the thing's even coming
Yeah,
on anyway. So,
I keep forgetting it.
but I think so much damage has been done, and there is so much baggage that would be something you just can't sit there and unpick, but you can't ignore it because so much of it's been absolutely pummeled in. It's become so ingrained with this keyword stuff and all the fantasy stuff and all the the Gallifrey and the Time Lords being destroyed still again for no reason. All this massive ball of shit that has now stuck itself to Doctor Who. It will take a long time to wash that off and to get rid of the stench because it's so permeated into the psyche of the general public who won't watch it because they think, oh, it's that preachy keyword show.
Yeah,
Not
and
interested.
that's a big factor
Yeah, it
because
is. It is.
when Classic Who went away, people didn't hate it. A lot of people were just, oh, it's had its day. Even though I personally thought it was actually getting better, but the BBC had made up their minds. But that's the irony, isn't it? When it was good, they wanted rid of it. Now it's the worst. They don't want it to go because it reflects them, and that's
Well,
all they
people
really
say,
care
oh,
about.
the BBC won't cancel it because it's their golden goose. It makes them so much money. Well, it used to be, and it used to do. But unfortunately, the reality is, even classic Who stuff, which is the big sellers usually, always, even now, today, you can go and pick up the season 7 limited edition Blu-ray box set. You can, to this day, go to the Character Options website and buy the Third Doctor Character Options online exclusive figure with
That
Sonic.
really surprised me. I thought, I mean, we're going to do, if you don't know, guys, we're actually doing a series of talks and podcasts where we're going to be talking about merchandise, specifically the Blu-ray, the season 7 Blu-ray, and just how utterly disappointed we were with it.
And I'm going to have to change the logo on there because I thought it was the Drawing JackRabbit account, but it's actually the podcast. So I have to change.
It's all right. Everyone knows me as JackRabbit, so it's fine. Yeah, and we're gonna talk about the action figures because, guys, I've got a complete collection, and honestly, at the state of this brand, to see the prices that this stuff is going for on eBay is just worthy of a topic in itself. But not to diverge too far from this. So, as I say, we will be covering just how all the merchandise sales have suffered because I think a lot of people have just become so apathetic that the whole thing is ruined for them. Which I don't think that happened with Classic Who. I don't think, I
Not
mean,
to this degree. Not to this degree.
All you have to do is look at the Wilderness years.
Mm.
And you see that was actually quite a golden era for merchandise, ironically. I mean, the Dapol figures weren't the best, but you know what? I loved their classic feel to them.
Well, they came in, I think 1988, from what I remember, because I remember, it was still on air, but they continued right through to the early 2000s, didn't they? I think, or did they? Or certainly in the 90s.
They continued actually until almost before characters started.
Right.
I think the BBC had found character options to be their next to be their next, merchandise
And
deal.
to
So
replace
they
Product
didn't
Enterprise.
renew. They didn't renew the deal with Dapol, and they didn't renew the deal with Product Enterprise, which was a shame because they made pretty good Daleks.
Damn good Daleks. Yeah. Well, this is the thing, when you've got I mean, yes, the BBC doesn't want to let go of Doctor Who because it's their golden goose, whatever. But the problem is that a lot of their income relies on the merchandise, and we've seen already certain, Eagle Moss went under, Big Chief went under, and now you've got what was it? Masters Replicas, whatever, Master Replicas, taking the license from Big Chief
Yes.
and Eagle
Now,
Moss.
I was going to say that I think we'll save this for our merchandise chat. But for those of you who are wondering, the Master Replicas have actually taken on the assets from Big Chief Studios, so they are releasing a 1/6 scale Master and a 1/6 scale Second Doctor. So I've only been made aware of this a few days ago, and so have you, Lee, because, like I say, when Doctor Who merch was coming out, usually everyone would be like, "Oh, look, this is coming," but it just
And it
goes to
was
show
gone.
you,
And it was
yeah,
gone almost within a week or whatever. Gone within a few hours even. Now, I believe those figures have been up for nearly 4 weeks, and they're still up for sale. And there's 500 each of those figures, but it's something that would have gone instantly a few years ago. You would,
definitely,
and that's a stark thing, because when you kind of notice these things, it becomes quite clear. The picture is very clear, and then when you've got licensees panicking, you can't have a healthy show and a bunch of panicking licensees whose livelihoods depend on being able to sell Doctor Who merchandise, not just solely Doctor Who merchandise, but it's supposedly a big part of it. Or they're sort of contractually obliged to produce things, for the New Who era, which just don't sell, and they're forced to fulfill those, and then lose, their income. So it's not sustainable for the peripherals around the BBC and BBC studios. But I can't see how it's going to be possible for them without a partner necessarily. Even though I still think they could produce Doctor Who without a partner, and I kind of feel that getting another streaming partner this soon now to come in is a big mistake, because I think you'll sort of haven't learned anything from the Disney experience. And I think leaping into bed with another partner straight after that, it seems like a rebound situation to me.
yeah, and it's like
Look at
I stated. At the end of the day, guys, you can fork out as much money, have as many streaming partners, or as many things as you like, but if you don't get rid of these people, nothing's ever going to change.
And it's
Like,
not just the people. It's everything that they stand for. This kind of cult like pod person mentality, where if they seem to think everything else. Oh, the reason why Doctor Who failed is because we didn't do this right. We didn't, we got the thing wrong with the, everything peripheral, everything not important. The timing wrong, or never the stories, never the actors, never the characters, never the way it's written, or the political messaging. None of that is ever mentioned by these people. They will not acknowledge or accept or even respond to those concerns. Those things are baked in, so therefore it can't be that, because those things are untouchable. They're perfect as they are. It's great editorially, blah blah blah. But it's those things that are causing it to die on the vine. But they will never acknowledge or even consider to change those. And until they can do that, you're going to get more of the same and more failure. And whether they bring it back in specials, whether they bring it back with another reduced season, or if they bring it back with a full season, all bells and whistles, a new carrier for, syndication, whatever, investment, it's all going to go down the toilet, especially if you bring it back too soon. And I've said this many times, if you bring it back too soon, you haven't given people enough time to miss the good things and forget the bad things. And there's an awful lot of that.
But it's not just that. You've got a lot of trust to regain. And it's like I say, if the BBC doesn't change, a lot of people are just going to go, well, I'm not going to start watching Doctor Who because we already know what direction it's going to go in.
It's fans that bring in the general audience. And they forget that. And when you decimate the fandom, I mean, they've even decimated their own fandom, the ones that they like, in half, effectively. When you do that, you're cutting off the font straight away, because it's them who bring in the general audience or spread the word, and then you get rid of that. You've cleared out the fan base. You've decimated so badly. You've created a terrible amount of distrust, hatred, even to some degree, for a lot of people, and distrust, as you rightly said. The general audience who are oblivious to all of this will just switch it off because it's not entertaining. It's crap. The writing's bad. The acting's bad. It's so camp. It's awful. It's too much. It's too much. And they need to rein that back in. And when you've got Russell T Davies saying, "Oh, it's got to be camp. It's got to be colourful. That's its, road to success."
Yeah,
well,
we
how
dare
did that
not.
work out for you?
Yeah, we dare not, traumatize the poor little darlings. It's just
They
like,
need to be traumatized. Kids should be traumatized by Doctor Who. That's how I got into Doctor Who. I was terrified of it, and I loved it. I loved being scared. Kids love being scared, and they love to watch these things and let their imaginations fire up. And you get hooked. That's how you hook them in. You scare the buggers. That's how Philip Hinchcliffe saw it. You scare the buggers. Not too much. It doesn't need to be gratuitous. You don't need to torture anyone, by the way. But I think you're right. It can't progress anywhere. And, for the sake, funny enough, for people who keep going on about change and progress, there's an awful lot of them who can't stand the idea of change and progress for real. But I'm aching for some change and some progress. I would love to see Doctor Who return, but I don't think it should straight away. And I think it needs to come back completely rebooted, fresh, no baggage, none of the Fitzroy clan, none of them at all. I don't care who backs it, as long as creative control is with creatives who actually understand science fiction, who have someone on hand who actually understands science, so that they can always go and get advice from them to make it authentic. It doesn't have to be
that's the thing.
overly intellectual.
If I came up with an idea and I handed it in, and they said, "This is a brilliant idea, but that's not how this works. In fact, scientifically, it would be more like this. So we just make this little change." And, I know the average person won't think anything of it, but it is more scientifically accurate. My response would be, "Oh, okay, yeah, if that makes sense." I mean, you can tell, obviously, I'm not the most sciencey person, but, they're like, "No, we love your idea. We just need to tweak these few things."
Yeah, I think.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
So, yeah. So, if they did that, that would be my response. I'd just be like, "That's fine." Now, can you imagine if they did that to Russell T Davies?
Oh God, no.
And the response you would get.
You wouldn't work again.
No.
As simple as that. But
this is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think the other thing is as well, that even if the general audience don't understand the themes or the science we're putting across, it doesn't matter. It's because it's based on something real, based on something tangible. It makes logical sense. And even if people, they can learn. So that a lot of kids grew up watching things like Star Trek and Doctor Who and learned about science through watching that. Not because it was preaching at you or it was trying to overly educate you, but it introduced things just slightly above your head that you were, oh, that piqued my curiosity, and it kind of drags you up a bit. It kind of pulls you along, and I think that's really good. It's aspirational. It gives kids something to think about, adults something to think about, and maybe explain it to their kids. Create a bit of conversation where it needs to be. Something, but science fiction is supposed to create these conversations, but it's not contrived and engineered in such a way that it's always about navel gazing, and about your identity and all these things. I mean, identity is important, but you can explore those through science fiction in a much more creative way than everything being set on Earth and preaching modern day. Even RTD, when he takes it to another planet, it's almost as if they're down the street, really. I mean, it might as well be, because of the themes that they're talking about are so 21st century hang up. And I think you need to be able to have someone who with a bit of vision that can go beyond these foibles.
It would be so nice if we could go back to the past where they weren't talking about issues that we'd be talking about today.
But they can't present the past as the past was anymore. BBC have made it absolutely clear that everything was diverse except in other countries. But in Britain, everything was always diverse. Funny that. Nowhere else. Nigeria, full of Nigerians. No problem there. Full of very, very homosexual friendly Nigerians, I may add. But nevertheless. And it's this kind of thing. It doesn't matter what the BBC does anymore. And this is not just Doctor Who's, throughout the entire BBC and for a lot of British broadcasters, that they can't do anything with conviction or authenticity or verisimilitude because it's not allowed by committee. It's decided by, this is the death of creativity. When you have committees of suits deciding, suits with, pink hair, admittedly, but suits nonetheless, deciding en masse that it has to be presented in this particular false way because it's supposed to be representative of what Britain's actually like, when in fact it's skewed far more in one direction than is real. And if you're going through time backwards, obviously that's going to change quite considerably, but you can't show that. You can't show history for what it actually is. They have to lie to you. And I don't like that. I think you should not have that kind of restriction. For a time travel show, you need to be able to present history, particularly as it was. You can project into the future and present whatever the hell you want. Let your imagination run wild, fine. But, even presenting the current day, like season 1 and 2 of the new era of Doctor Who, virtually almost everyone was either gay or trans or non-binary or whatever, or a person of color, to use a horrible racist term. And I think that it's utterly bamboozling because that's not real. It's not real. You're creating a false cozy blanket for a certain group of elites who don't tend to step outside or mix out circles with the working class or anything. And I think that shows the level of middle class anxiety and pearl clutching. For all their talk of being anti-conservative, they are the most conservative. They want to preserve their little niche, and to hell with everyone else. And you can't have it, and it's ours. And it's so. It's got a crazy kind of way of looking at the world, and it's so skewed and it's so distorted. But they don't see that. They see it as any criticism as fundamentally evil. And you can't go through life like that. And you certainly can't bring that into Doctor Who because it just doesn't work. You'll turn your audience off.
Which brings me to, I suppose, the final point is, does Doctor Who deserve to come back? And I know this is a horrible thing to say. It's a horrible thing to ponder because with Classic Who, it was made by wonderful people who just wanted to tell escapism, but obviously it hasn't been that for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like the show's entire identity has been completely changed. And I just think when things do eventually change, fingers crossed, and things do swing away from the insanity that they are now, is Doctor Who something that can actually survive the purge and come out the other side?
First of all, I think we need to understand what Doctor Who is and what it isn't, and differentiate that. I think that Doctor Who is 1963 to 1989 and 1996. I think New Who is something else. It's an altogether different animal. It's not at all like the original series at all for me. And I think a lot of people, if you're honest with yourselves, will agree with that. I'm not telling you to agree with that. I'm telling you, if you actually think about it, they are very two different shows. I don't think classic Doctor Who deserves to be wrecked along with New Who. I think it deserves and should stand on its own and be looked at on its own. It's unfortunate it's gotten dragged down with New Who because they've gone through so much of the lore and the past of Doctor Who, and they've weaved themselves in. You know, when they do re-edits of the classic series, they put all the new effects in, and it's all like New Who.
Oh yeah, we'll be getting onto that, guys. Don't you
To,
worry.
to
We'll
me,
be...
to me, that's smacks of desperation. That smacks of look. We are the natural successors. We are now the definitive version. Blah, and it's so contrived, and I find that it looks to me like they just don't believe in what they're doing. They're trying to splurge over the whole of Doctor Who and make it one whole thing, this universe. And it isn't. I'm sorry, but it isn't. You can have your pocket universe. You can have that. But if you're going to bring Doctor Who back, and does it deserve to come back? Classic Who deserves to be recognized as the definitive Doctor Who, because that's what it was. That's what Doctor Who was. Whatever this is, it's a different beast. And like any reboot, which is what it is, it's not a it's a reboot. It has to be looked at as its own thing. And I would shunt that off into its own thing. You can still have it, but it's over there. And anything from Doctor Who going forward in the future, because classic Doctor Who doesn't deserve to be recognized as part of all this, it's on its own. It's its own thing, and you continue from there, and then branch off from that. You can have, like, even if that reboot lasts a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, whatever, and then dies on a vine, fine. You can always bring it back and start from number 8 again, and then go on. Do you see what I mean? You can do that.
I
People
do
can
think
choose.
I think that the trouble is and it's knowing how to word this is obviously we want it to go away for a long break, but we don't want it to be too long because there one of two things could happen. One, people could start to miss it and they could be like, oh, I remember when it was good. Or they can just be like, oh, now that it's been gone for a long time, I've realized that it was so bad. I actually don't want it to come back because do you know what? I've gotten over it.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that Doctor Who necessarily. I mean, if you look at the Wilderness Years, I mean, God, if we had AI during the Wilderness Years, can you imagine? But I think democratizing Doctor Who is a possible way for Doctor Who to survive another Wilderness Years, and that is to allow people to create their own. I'm not saying like just crappy fan films and whatever, just AI abominations at left, right, and center, but allow for that technology to democratize it and see which rises to the top and which as technology improves and creativity is inspired through the Wilderness Years, the gloves can be truly off. And I don't think if the BBC is wise enough, they could allow that form of creativity because you're allowing the fandom to kind of repair itself and to allow Doctor to survive in a period of time where they can still sell their own the BBC can still sell the merchandise, whatever, but you still got people talking about it. Still got people sharing their creations and allowing that. I mean, you know, Big Finish came out of the Wilderness Years as a fan audio production. You know, what is it? Audio visual, and they made a success of that. To this day, I still don't know how they're still going, but there we go. But I think their time really should be up now. I think you've got to loosen that grip, because if you Fitzroy people keep hold of this and keep your firm grip on it, you're denying everyone else a chance. You're going to go to your graves clutching onto it, and you'll destroy it forever, because you're not going to allow for change and progress, which is what you've been banging on about for however many years.
But
You're not allowing it to happen.
We all know what they mean when they say that. They're not talking
about
in
change,
terms of the show. They're
progress.
Talking about in terms of society and progression and all this. And I worry that is what is going to happen. I just think they are going to go to the grave with it. And
we have to accept that.
The difficult thing for me is I'm sat here doing this stream with you, and there is a voice in my head going, "What am I doing?" Like you know, like what it just feels like. Is there any real reason to be trying to save this thing anymore? Because, you know, I'm a fan, and you know that I've got my own ideas, my own things for the show. I think, and the truth is, I'm not alone in that. Thousands of people do, you know. And at the end of the day, you say, oh, AI is coming in and this is going to be... I mean, I have a completely different opinion on that. I feel like if everyone is making it, then what's to say a definitive version of anything when someone can just go and make it in their room?
I think things naturally tend to sink or swim anyway. Like we saw with that Doctor Who Mid-Journey and Daryl Joyce, for example. Those two spring to mind as just rising to the top. There's so much crap out there. I mean, AI is something, whether you're good at using it or not, it can look terrible, and very obviously AI, you know. But there are people who can wield it very, very cleverly and make it look very professional. And as that technology improves, it will only get better, that they can actually produce stuff that will actually look like you could watch it on TV and have that level of creativity and have scripts for it that are actually good. So whether or not it looks great is one thing, but you still need talent in order to write the scripts. And I don't think AI necessarily is the way to go with that. I still think human writing is going to survive and do well. And with good AI mixed in with original art or original performances, you can produce something on the cheap that will look just as good as any Doctor you like, and you can make it look like any particular era of Doctor you like, or your own, or whatever. And there's an infinite bounty there. And I think if the BBC are wise, they would allow that, not only to allow that, but maybe release sort of AI packages, you know, with information where, you know, prompts that you can give you, you know, the rights to, you know, if let's say they have the rights for you to use Tom Baker, you can use him, you know, if he's okay with that. But as long as there's sort of a licensing agreement, like, you know, when you buy a DVD or a CD, that's a license. You don't own it. You actually own the license to watch it at home. So that kind of thing, you know, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah. I think really the main problem for Doctor Who's future isn't necessarily just the production. It's the fans, the fandom itself. It's so torn apart. It's so toxic.
That's the thing, because another thing that we haven't talked about, which I'll mention in a minute, I just want to quickly go to the chat and I want to say a big thank you to all of you who are here this evening. PD Rich, Dr. Mew, Noel from the TARDIS Zone, and Wookie Fever. You know, I really appreciate you guys being here. It's really cool to have you. And PD, you mentioned about New Who Easter eggs. We are going to be covering that extensively in our talk about the Blu-ray box sets, because it is very irritating. And as Dr. Muse pointed out, how Big Finish have ruined the majority of spare parts. And I'm not too. I haven't listened to Spare Parts. I've heard it's good.
It is.
But
It is good.
I'm not in the whole field with what's going on there. So I can't really comment on that. But just to sort of stay true to the topic of the future of Doctor Who, I think it is very complex, because I think we as fans all have our own ideals of what we want Doctor Who to be. But the truth is, I find myself just ever more burnt out with this show, and I think the trouble is, because it's been bad for such a long time, it's difficult for people, because with Classic Who, like, you guys reached peak at season 14. We're at series 14 technically, and it's the worst it's ever been, and it's been going through the floor arguably as far back as season 6 with that dreadful finale.
It's
I
such a
know
contrast, isn't it?
I know,
from
yeah,
classic.
I know opinions do vary on this. I think Day of the Doctor is so overrated. I didn't like it when I was 14, and I just find it to be okay now. Not exactly a 50th for a show as old as it was. It was more of an 8-year fanboy splurge over New Who. And, I just cannot look at this and go, I think you're right. I think Classic Who is the definitive Doctor Who. And yeah, PD Rich JNT. I admit that he made some bad decisions, but I do think there is a lot of good in 80s Who, and I think I'd take him any day to anyone who's been involved with the 2005 onwards. I don't think he deserves the hate he gets at all. But my Doctor Who journey really is a sad one. As in my personal life, I've been having a lot of struggles, and it's just Doctor Who isn't really there to help me through them anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. And I'm extremely jealous of those people who got to watch it from the start and just watch it get gradually more and more better, and then of course go downhill a little bit, but overall still remain that show that they loved. And I think with New Who, it's just because it has stuck with these, and I'm going to call them talentless hacks, who quite honestly, obviously have gotten most of their ideas from other people.
Yeah, it's a facsimile of Doctor Who,
It
and
has
it
now
is very
become,
facile.
it has now become something that is just laughable. And you still get people going, oh, I did love it, when I grown up with David Tennant and Matt Smith and all that when I was a kid, but it doesn't seem to have that longevity. And I don't think you're going to get people from my generation in their 40s and 50s clamoring for
Well,
it to come back,
no one's
because
talking
we'll have
about it.
moved on.
No one's talking about it.
No.
I mean, look how close we are still to the broadcast of the last season 2, the Gatwa era. No one's talking about it. No one's still talking about the Omega, and look at how quickly it's forgotten. It's hard even to know the name of these episodes off the top of your head, and that's the thing. And I think my worry for the future of Doctor Who is who's going to take it on, and what vision will it be? Will it be inspired by Russell T Davies, or will it be inspired by people who revise and go back and watch the classics? I'm worried about that.
If it, as I say, and if it does take until my generation, I mean, I personally think my generation gets far too much hate. But if it is, as you say, inspired by RTD's original run, then no, it shouldn't come back. Not because I'm saying if you're a New Who fan, you're inferior. That's not what I'm saying. But because New Who was, a bit of a step too far away from Doctor Who as it was. I think you can take elements perhaps from New Who, but I think Classic Who, I think it just has so much more to it. And I think what I want, if I were to do it, if I were to bring it back, it would be what New Who should have been or could have been. You know, if it just had grown a pair and just stopped being so camp and
It
parody.
needs to feel like a continuation of the original run, just updated. You know, renewed. Renewed is the word. It needs that continuity. It needs that vibe. You need that kind of gothic element to it. You need that Edwardian quality to it, and you need that kind of very dry British sense of humor.
And this is the problem,
And the
because
monsters. You need monsters.
absolutely. But the problem is because, and I didn't want to bring politics into this, but because of the times we're living in, you can't not. Because Britain, especially more than America, I believe, not to say you guys aren't under attack as well, but I think Britain, you are not allowed to be quintessentially British anymore. It is the most attacked culture on the face of the planet, and I miss it. You know, and I'm not being racist. I'm not, but I'm getting so sick of all the your blood, you're in it, you're beating it, yeah, and you know, just all this hip hop, all this bollocks, and I miss the British identity. I would love to. This is why I love the 11th Doctor's second costume so much. The waistcoat, you know, I love that. And you say like it's got to go back to that. You know, by the time I get to 40, you know, saying something like that might get you put in a Labour camp.
Well, isn't
You
it
know?
funny though that, you know, when they brought New Who back, they didn't want him to be in a quote unquote costume, but when they did make that costume for Matt Smith, the purple coat, it was for me the most doctory look we've had, and it worked. It did work, and it's supposed to be a man out of time, a man who is an alien who thinks, you know, oh, this is what they wear, because, you know, centuries to him are like weeks to us. So he's not going to be fashion on point, you know, and he shouldn't be. He should be awkward. He should look like a sore thumb, you know. Doesn't necessarily have to look like he's been dragged through the head or backwards or anything, but, you know, he has to look quintessentially like an Englishman, but out of time. You know, he has that look. He has to have a silhouette, and this is a massive issue with the last couple of seasons. You know, he didn't really have a look.
No.
And you can't have a Doctor that just looks like every man, you know, or anybody. And I don't think that makes it any more inclusive by doing that. I don't think it works, because you can be inclusive and all that, but the Doctor still needs to look like the Doctor. You need to identify the Doctor as the Doctor, you know, and it's not about you identifying yourself as the Doctor. The Doctor is the Doctor. You can't identify as the Doctor.
No.
You want to aspire to be the Doctor. You want to aspire to have his morals. You want to aspire to want to be with him, to journey with him, and but he's that untangible kind of aloof figure, the smartest man in the room, the oddball. You know, that comes naturally. You know, you write that character. You don't write the character to be like the actor playing the character, unless you're Tom Baker or John Pertwee or William Hartnell. You draw elements from those character actors, because they were character actors. They weren't leading men actors. And this is a massive problem with Doctor Who. They keep trying to cast leading actors when really you need a character actor who looks a bit off.
Well, I think
that's really what the best.
I think that is your opinion, but I think there will be fans and other Doctor Who
no
fans
doubt
out there who don't have that opinion.
No doubt.
And this
but
is...
that's when successful Doctor Who was successful, was when the Doctor was like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think that if the show does go forward, I don't think it should copy what has come before, if that makes sense. I think it should draw inspiration from it, but don't just be like, the Doctor has to be like this, the Doctor has to be like that. I think, you know, the Doctor needs to keep it, because if we're being honest, Pertwee was a departure from what the Doctor was, and it worked. Tom Baker was a huge departure from what the Doctor was. Yeah. And it actually took a lot of people back in the day to warm to him, because it was such a massive departure.
But they all had that common thread. There was
Yes,
a
the common
commonality.
thread. That's what's been lost with New Who.
It's
That that's
been
what was
severed
lost.
completely. It's been cut completely off. Now anybody can play the Doctor, and
Yeah, and
that's
I disagree with that
when
strongly.
people say that, and that's the thing with the fandom. People parrot whatever the producers say, and therefore that's a good thing, you know. And I find that appeal to authority very anti-doctory. I find it very conformist, and the Doctor is not a conformist. But yet they, whatever the current showrunner or whatever says, they'll go, "Oh yes," and then repeat it ad infinitum, like, you know, shows all about change, or anybody can play the Doctor, you know. It's because they've been told that, but they don't really think about that and what it actually means to the
No,
character.
and going back to the fandom, the YouTuber who's a grumpy old fan, he summed it up quite well in one of his videos a while back. The fandom has been split into two groups. Ultimately, those who think the Doctor is and should be who he's always been, and those who believe that the Doctor can be anybody.
Yeah,
And those two sides of fandom will be at war until the end of time.
never
They'll
the
never
twain
agree.
shall meet. Yeah, exactly, and
And that's what's happened. And we've never had a divide like this.
and you need a bold visionary to go, do you know what, I'm going to do it my way, but I'm going to do it because I've listened. And I've listened to both sides. I've listened and understood the arguments, but I'm going to go and do it this way, which is I'm going to keep the Doctor as he's always been. I'm going to have all the diversity you want in a companion or you know, in the stories, whatever. That's fine. But the Doctor is the Doctor, and yes, he does change, but he's a man for one, and he's an aristocrat who's escaping his history. So basically an Englishman, an alien idea of an Englishman.
Well,
That's
that's
what
the
Philip
thing, isn't it?
Hinchcliffe described him
A
as.
lot of people forget that, they're like, oh, the Doctor shouldn't be conservative. Like, the Doctor's never been conservative. He was he was anti-establishment. He ran away from the snobby Time Lords because he wanted to be his own person. But I don't necessarily think, and I think this is quite ignorant of a lot of people, that the Doctor doesn't have some conservative values. And I also think the Doctor has some liberal values. And this is why I think the next person who takes over, if they are politically biased, then we have a problem. And
Well,
I think that accounts to either side. We don't want Doctor Who to be woke left. We don't want it to be far Christian right. We want Doctor Who to be Doctor Who
well,
and
the
monsters,
Doctor
escapism.
the Doctor shouldn't really be all that bothered or interested in petty human politics. He's above that. He's the Doctor. He's a ancient Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, for Christ's sake. He is above all that. He's aloof to that. He scoffs at that nonsense. So who cares what you, there's wrong and there's right. Okay. There's like, you can either be oppressed or not oppressed, you know. There's a problem that needs solving, it needs to be solved. You know, people's lives are on the line, I need to save them. It's that simple. It's very cut and dry. He's not going to hang around, you know, to make sure that everyone's, you know, doing the right things and not putting plastic into the oceans or you know, all these other foibles. You know, that's for human beings to concern themselves with. I've got this job to do, I need to get it done. Don't get in my way, I'm here to save you. Right, done, I'm off. That's it. He's not going to stick around and encourage you to vote in particular ways. It's not up to him. He's not interested. That's for you guys to sort out. I've done my bit. I'm off. That's the Doctor.
Yeah.
He does. It's not hanging around to, you know, to stroke your petty egos or to agree with your politics. He doesn't care about your politics. Your politics are humanly, earthly things to do. You know, he's Time Lord. He travels through time, like for thousands of years. You know, he's not bothered. The only thing he's interested in is to make sure that, you know, people aren't being, you know, under the jackboot of, you know, some overreaching power. That's it. And who's against that? Nobody is against that. That's a universalism. I mean, there are some people who do subscribe to these ideologies that are very authoritarian. But it's amazing how the liberal left tend not to call some of them out, but only certain others that they do, or certain ones that they perceive to be that aren't, but they say that they are anyway. So you can't tie the Doctor to your current day mode of thinking, because tomorrow it will all be different, and then it will be dated. And that's not good, for longevity, for a Time Lord that travels through time and space to be tied to a particular era of earthly shenanigans. It's silly.
But I'm
It's
sorry,
short-sighted.
I think part of Doctor Who's original success was its Britishness, and I think if you're someone who hates Britishness, Doctor Who isn't for you. And I think the TARDIS Zone says it perfectly. Doctor Who isn't a show for everybody.
No.
Nothing is for everybody. There's always going to be someone who, doesn't like something, and that's okay. But I think Doctor Who is quintessentially British. It's not American sci-fi, it's not African sci-fi, it's not Asian sci-fi, it is British sci-fi. Yeah. And I think that is something that it has lost.
And it should be unapologetically so too.
Yes, exactly. And it's something that my generation are getting sick of, is just having to feel guilty for everything. I miss British culture. I miss Britishness. It's why I'm watching so many old films and old TV shows at the moment, because I miss it. And I think Doctor Who fares much better with British sci-fi. I love the way people talk in those classic Doctor Who stories. I love the Brigadier. I love those snobby villains, because they're so fun.
Yeah.
You don't get that now. Now you get villains who are like, "You're sup, lad, I'm gonna walk in a tick over the gaff, yeah." And it's like, I'm sorry. It's like, "Yo, everyone, we gonna exterminate this neighborhood, like, yo." It's like, no, I'm not doing it. I can't wait till we get a story where the Daleks announce that they're made of biodegradable plastic.
It's happening. It's gonna happen, right?
It's gonna happen. Like, you just have to joke about it, and that's not me being racist, okay? Because I am sure that there are black people out there who will go, "Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I'm getting sick and tired of it."
Of course,
because you can't just say that, "Oh, you're black, so you got to be into hip hop. You got to talk like an absolute twat, and you've also got to, constantly hate everything that's white."
And that's the thing. Like the whole New Who era, particularly from the Chibnall era onwards, I'd say, stand out as being so obsessed with all these things about diversity, but it's all very much one direction and very much stereotypical. It's not good. It's not healthy to present diversity in a way that is so myopic and monopolar, where all black people or all gay people or all trans people have to think in one way and everyone else is evil. That is not good representation. It makes them insufferable characters that are unlikable, and that is doing them a disservice. And it's so short-sighted. And just to go back to your point about it, Doctor Who, or Noel's point about Doctor Who not being for everyone, absolutely, it isn't for everyone, but it should be open to everyone.
Yes.
But you have to accept it for what it is, not what you want it to
change it to suit you and you alone.
That's narcissistic.
That's not fair. And then you can't just force out the fans you don't like.
No.
And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
But, just in case I went a bit too hasty with what I said earlier, with the impressions, a perfect example of something where I don't see color at all is the film Alien. I don't look at Parker and see him as, oh, he's that black fella. I don't look at, I just like, wow, what a great story. What great characters with individual personalities. And, I feel like RTD's original era did handle that for the most part. I didn't look at Mickey Smith as the black character. I saw Mickey Smith as Mickey Smith.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. It's the same for me. As a little kid, I would be watching Benson, in Soap, or and loving his character and not even thinking about it, or Blazing Saddles, loving that film as a kid, you know, and that dealt with race in a very, very funny way, and it was brilliant, written by a black guy and a Jew. And then Blake Seven, you had Dana, who was a black female character in the crew, and that was back in 1981 when she was introduced, or 19, I can't remember. But it wasn't even. I love these characters. Didn't think for a second, you know. I used to watch. Till Death Us Do Part and all those, you know, you had race being discussed in that, but you had black characters in there who were very, very funny and sympathetic. You had Rising Damp, another black character in there from a fantastic actor. And you love these characters, not because they're black or not because of any other reason other than they were great characters, well written, brilliantly acted. And that's all I care about. And, you know, a lot of people say the Doctor shouldn't be played by a black guy or whatever. I tend to think he should be like he's always been, because it makes narrative sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make narrative sense to you can change that artificially, and it's very contrived, and it's never addressed, which is stupid. It should be addressed, and it causes a lot of problems during time travel.
And when you say something as outrageous as, "Oh, my first black body, so you know I'm going to experience all this crap,"
and that's like, divisive. It's divisive, and it's a lie. And not only that, you know, I mean, I cheerleaded to have Patterson Joseph as the Doctor. I thought he would, but he's got a very quintessentially Britishness about him.
And Richard
Ayoade.
Yeah, thank you. I can't pronounce his surname. Sorry. I thought, you know, he's geeky, he's awkward. I thought he'd be really good. You know, if you had to do the race change, if you had to do it for whatever bullshit political reason, at least have the respect to pick someone who was suited.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ncuti Gatwa was far from suitable.
And I'm sorry, but
the antithesis of the Doctor.
I'm gonna do a Noel, right? I'm gonna do a Noel. I'm gonna say, I did say this first, everybody. I said this first, right here. I didn't like him. I did. as soon as I saw him, as soon as I saw that red carpet thing, I was just like, no.
Yeah, I was out.
No,
I was out.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And I didn't want to do, but you know, a black and gay Doctor, it's like, God, the checklist is stretching to the end of the garden. You know,
it's not the fact that he's a black guy or a gay actor. It's the fact that he chose to make the Doctor, or they chose to make the Doctor Ncuti Gatwa rather than Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor. Do you know what I mean? So it became more about ego and about presenting diversity and inclusion without actually doing the work, you know, and it's just and you can't say anything because it's racist or it's homophobic.
Well, that's it. It's fair criticism. Then. It's a shield.
It's a shield, immediate shield, and it's even fair criticism. You can't say anything in case you're deemed as this, that, and the other. Doesn't work with me because I don't care. But a lot of people don't. And it's sad that people who know what Doctor Who is or what it should be are told that they're wrong or they're evil or they're racist or homophobic or whatever, simply because they didn't enjoy what they were being delivered. And what they were delivered was shit. Period. End of story. It's not complicated. He was miscast. Jodie Whittaker was miscast. The Doctor shouldn't have been a female. I'm sorry. There are plenty of female Time Lords. We had the Rani back. And what did you do with her? You fucked that up. You know, Missy. I love Missy. I actually love Missy. I think the Master would do something like that, you know, as an ultimate disguise, because we know he loves to disguise himself. So it made sense to me. Not the same thing with the Doctor. It's a different character. So the motivations are different. It doesn't. What works for one doesn't work for the other. You know, I mean, I'm revising whether or not Missy was a good idea, but I still enjoyed her at the time.
Yeah.
But I think it did set the path we're on now, which is complete total destruction.
So getting back onto the topic, the future of Doctor Who. So I stand by what I said. I just think, you know, if it's still the BBC involved creatively, if it's still anyone that has been near involved with this Fitzroy lot, or even people who ideologically are the same as them, you know. And I'm not talking like you can't have anyone left wing, but it has to be balanced. You have to, you know, have an actual inclusive group of people with various different opinions, and it needs to maintain its Britishness. If you get people who don't have that, then I'm sorry, there's no point. And fans are fickle, and you know, we'll be addressing this in the merchandise videos as well. And if people just keep on getting their hopes up, you know, when stupidly, you know, in my opinion, then I'm sorry, but this is just never going to get any better. And I don't want to sound like this. I don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, nothing's ever going to get any better, you know.
Yeah,
Or
but
anything
you
like that.
didn't you
But
didn't arrive at this point because you felt like it. You arrived at this point because you were made to arrive at this point. You were forced here. And that is, for me, an absolute shame and a stain on the whole Fitzroy group and their managing of Doctor Who. It's been mismanaged, and they've used Doctor Who as a weapon to beat people around the face and head with. And to me, I can't forget or forgive that. And I think that they have a reckoning to answer for, quite honestly. Now, I hear names floated around like Pete McTeague. I don't want Pete McTeague. I don't want any of them near this. But Pete McTeague, let's look at him. He wrote 2 episodes of Doctor Who which stood out as being pro-corporation and anti-white male. And he's a white male. So what the hell are you doing? Why do you hate yourself so much and project that onto us? I don't understand that. And I just think that it's so confused and so hateful. His malicious speech that he put into Ncuti Gatwa's mouth at the end of the episode, Lucky Day, whatever it's called, was such shite, trite shite. It was so evil, actually, in the way that hatred, and I think that's an amalgamation of him, RTD, and Ncuti Gatwa putting across this hate-fueled message that anyone who doesn't agree with me or doesn't believe in the BBC is an evil, nasty, vicious bigot that's going to die soon. And that's how they look at you. And for them to be so down with the common people, no, they're not. They go to their champagne dues and their black tie events and all that. They don't give a crap about the work.
well,
They know how to write common muck on a high rise, which they've never fucking been to in their lives, clearly. But if any of those people say, "Excuse me, can you not write us like that or portray us in? Oh, you're just an evil bigot. See, we were right. How dare you question us? No one says no to us. Blah blah blah." That's the mentality that needs to go.
yeah,
It needs to go now for Doctor to stand any chance. And I would just say people like Pete McTeague are, quite honestly, traitors. You could do great little trailers, but that's not running Doctor. It's a whole different thing.
I honestly thought that during the Chibnall era, he was the only fan in the production team. He spoke like a fan. He spoke very highly of Classic Who. I thought perhaps his scripts were tempered with, or you know, he was just really scared to oppose what was going on. But I
Quite
think
possibly.
after that little thing with RTD, I just don't see,
Mm.
unless RTD was very forceful. But even the script itself, like, just wasn't very Doctor Who-y. I mean, do you know, I think if I was a fan and I was working for that production team, I think I'd walk. I think, I mean,
Yeah.
unless he's that desperate for money, I just don't think I could do that
For
to my
him,
favorite show.
for him to take over the reins, if Kingmaker Russell just deems it so, I'm going to want him shackles off and say, I want him to say, well, there's a lot of criticism for what I did, and I want him to acknowledge that. I want him to not necessarily apologize, but I want him at least to go, I'm not under the thumb of anyone else anymore. I'm my own person, and I'm going to do it my way, and it's not going to be like what I've done before. I will want assurances, but ultimately, I don't think any of these people from the Fitzroy group are are people who should be anywhere near the show ever again. I think they should be absolutely banned, quite honestly, from ever going anywhere near Doctor Who again. I don't even want to see them make public appearances, quite honestly. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but I don't want to see them. There needs to be more distance between the show, us, and them. They should go off and do their own things now. Let someone else come in fresh with a new, fresh set of ideas that is not politically motivated. Take it back to being apolitical. If you're going to do political stuff in the show, let it be so written that the audience can sit there and look at two sides of things and make their own mind up about what's right and wrong.
But I think when you look at everything else the BBC is putting out, I just don't think that is possible,
That's
which
the
is
problem.
why I emphasize again, if the BBC are involved creatively, I mean, I just feel like, you know, as wokeness is dying, we just know the BBC is going to be the last to you know, they're going to fight with everything they have. Let's say, you know, the show comes back in 10 years. If it is still the BBC, if it is still people who are descendants from the people who've been running it for the past 20 years, you're wasting your time.
Well, it's very nepotistic. BBC is always, you know, for all their talk about progress, the one thing that again never changes are the people at the top. They are always people who are put in those positions because they know someone who knows someone, or that they're related to someone who knows someone, or they're, you know, it's all nepotism and cronyism, and that culture at the BBC hasn't changed in all those years. In the 100 years, it's never changed. And I can't see it ever changing. But they've clearly had a bit of a house clearance at the BBC of getting rid of anyone who isn't totally committed to the cause, you know, with the fist banners and all that kind of stuff, which is ironic because they just end up fisting themselves. But I would like to think that if the BBC was forced into becoming a commercial channel rather than a state-funded broadcaster, then they would have to let the market decide, and then they would have to hire people who actually know what the hell they're doing. The DEI scam needs to go because it's nothing to do with people of color or gender or race or sexuality or whatever. It's nothing to do with that. It's only using that as a cipher for Marxism and Marxist ideas and radical left to get into positions of influence and power, and using minorities to achieve that. But you can be a minority all you like. If you're not totally down with the whole charade, then you're not invited, not included. So much for that diversity and inclusion. I mean, I'm a gay man, and I wouldn't stand a snowball chance in hell of getting a job at the BBC. No matter how gifted I was in editing or, you know, acting or music or whatever it was, they wouldn't be interested because whilst I tick the box on paper, you know, what are your views on this, that, and the other? And me being me, I'll be very honest, and that would be out. You know, I wouldn't be out. I would be out. I wouldn't be included in their you know, the little scam that they've got going. It's a protection racket. They protect themselves and make a racket.
So as a whole, summarize, what do you think will be the future of Doctor Who going forward?
It's very hard to see where it's going forward. I think what they're going to do is obviously going to be the exact opposite of what they should be doing. I think that's almost certainty. They're going to bring it back in a couple of years and with the special, whatever, carry on with Billy Piper and Tennant or whatever, and whatever nonsense they're going to do. They're going to get millions of dollars from some other whatever. How that's going to work, though, if it's going to be Amazon, they're not going to want RTD on board. But is RTD going to walk away? Has he already walked away? I suspect he has, quite honestly. But I don't know. It's so muddled. They've left such a mess. For it to survive, what I think they should do, which is obviously not what they're going to do, is leave it for a minimum of 5 years. The rot needs to dry. the paint needs to go on. The hammering and the fixing of it needs to happen. But without a culture change, it's just going to be more of the same. It's going to fail. They need to let it go away for at least 5 years minimum. I suspect it's possible that they're going to say it's going to come back in 2 years, but it won't.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it needs to go away, and it needs fresh blood for it to stand any chance. BBC needs a cultural shift to succeed. I don't know, beyond 2027, if they still got the TV license, I can't see that changing. As for American influence from streaming sites, whatever, I think that's very short-sighted. I think that's a double-edged sword, and we've seen it already with Disney. Unless they absolutely stipulate that Doctor Who must actually look like Doctor Who.
Well, do you know what? I'm not against, at this rate, if it meant taking it out of the hands of the BBC and these Muppets, I'd be more than happy for an Anglophile American to come in and love the Britishness about it and use that wonderful American dosh to, give it a nice.
But I don't think there should be too much money. There shouldn't be too much money in it.
Okay,
you put too much money in it. You put too much money in it, it becomes too like Disney. The creativity is stifled because there's too much money. I think it needs less money. Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. Jack. No, I didn't know it was my show.
I've been burnt.
Just saying, manners. So, wow. I can't remember where I was now. As I was going to say, but keep its traditional classicness about it. Don't make it like a Marvel film. Don't make it like a high-budget CGI fest. Keep the traditionalness about it. Is that what you were saying, Lee?
Pretty much.
Okay, thank you. So...
wow. Okay, I've been told. Jesus Christ.
There's nothing that irks me more than being spoken over.
Well, Noel does it all the time.
Yeah, I know. It's difficult, all right?
If I don't get it out, I'll forget.
I've given you like an hour to get it out.
It's not enough.
Okay, no, sorry, I worded that wrong. But ignore that. If JT were here, it'd be So, so the future of Doctor Who, as I said, I'd be more than happy. I just want someone to take it away from the people that it's currently with. I think that's important. If I want it to, I know this is a horrible thing to say, but I want it to go away for longer than 2 years, definitely. Yeah. I'd say longer than 5 years. I'd say 10. 10 would be enough. 10 it's quite a solid number, and it's quite a lot can change in that time.
I think the best time to bring it back would be for either the 70th or the 75th anniversary. The 75th is, three quarters of a century. That's a massive anniversary year. That would be great. An anniversary year to bring it back would be ideal. So either the 70th or the 75th, quite honestly.
It would be nice. But until then, and I can't urge this enough, I think we as fans really need to take a step back and stop trying to... I don't know how to word this. Stop trying to, ensure that it carries on. We need to let it rest. We need to recharge, and we need to come back when it's good. Because if we just keep, showing them that all they have to do is dangle anything in front of us and we'll jump on it, it's just nothing's ever going to get any better.
Well, that is a problem with Doctor Who fandom. It's they accept just about anything that's given to them. If it's got the logo on it, they'll just suck it up. And I think that needs to change, because if you don't say no to things, you're just going to get more of the same. And we deserve better, I think.
Absolutely. So the future of Doctor Who, honestly, a long rest is what it needs. But ultimately, and this might be a bit pretentious to say this, but only time will tell.
That's it.
Honestly. See, Lee, look what you've done. Look at the comments. Look what people think of me.
That's my fault now, is it? Wow. Okay. I'll never speak again. I'll come on in and I'll just say
Speak when you are told to speak.
Help me, people. I'm blinking 3 times here. I've got my thumb in my fingers here. Like, help.
Right, so we're going to wrap it up here, guys, because I've got work tomorrow, unlike Russell T Davies. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who's been in the chat. Great to see Noel, great to see Wookie, Devious Dinosaurs and Demons, and just all the PD from earlier. Just thanks so much, guys, for all of you who've been in the chat. Dr. Mew, and I hope I haven't missed anybody. Bobby D was in the chat. And at the very start, we had Mark McCambridge. So thanks to all of you for showing up, and for those
and Nicholas
of you
Horton, who just subscribed to your channel at the start.
Thank you. Well. Thanks. I really appreciate that. That we're going to be dedicated. We're going to do a series like where we talk about the merchandise, the Blu-ray box sets, and just really kind of wind everything down, because I think we've got a lot that we need to say, and before we can let it rest, we need to say these things, because just the way that they are just letting this stuff slide just isn't acceptable to me. And a lot of fans say that it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread, when it's not.
No.
So as I say, if you guys want to tune in for that, just stay tuned to the channel. I'll be sure to mention all of that. So I know Noel's going to want me to wind down as if it was his channel, so that's what I'm going to do. So please like, share, and subscribe. Ring the bell notification so you don't miss a video whenever. Thank yous to all of you in the chat. And I thank you, Lee, for coming on. Yous have been great. And I shall see yous all in the next one. Bye-bye for now.
And bye-bye from then.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.